I know one thing for sure, two things for certain. Romeo Dobbs is due for a breakout season. You know what I'm saying? For you all that may not know, Romeo Dobbs signed a 4-year, $80 million contract with the New England Patriots. I just think that this is his moment. You know what I'm saying? This is his moment to break out and finally, implement himself into that top 10 to top 15 range. Well, I say top 10 because I do think he's borderline top 15. Not even borderline, but he's in the top 15 for sure. But to inch his name into the top 10 discussion, you know what I'm saying? I think he needs one of those seasons where, he reaches that threshold of 1,000 yards. You know what I'm saying? Because for receivers in this day and age, that 1,000-yard threshold is basically like the magic number to place your name onto the scene. You know what I'm saying? For people to really start paying attention to you, gathering your attention. You know what I'm saying? Similar to what Alec Pierce is doing with the Colts. You know what I'm saying? When his first 1,000-yard receiver season, and now he was one of the big names going into free agency. You know what I'm saying? People wondering what he was going to do or whatnot. So that 1,000-yard threshold is really what makes or breaks, you know what I'm saying, a big time receiver. Because I just think that, the fact that he was still able to get 700 yards within a limited offense in the Green Bay Packers, I still think that, you know what I'm saying, if he was in a better system, such as the New England Patriots, or if he was in a system where he had more freedom and he had a quarterback that actually looked his way, or if he had a system that actually looked his way towards some of those, throws that may have been missed, or, the missed timing of some of those routes that he was doing, because the Green Bay Packers have so many receivers to feed that sometimes it throws off the timing of, other of the routes that he's running. I do think if they connected on some of those, he would have easily reached that 1,000-yard threshold, and he definitely would have been, one of the top receivers, you know what I'm saying, in this free agency. Even though me personally, I think that he was definitely the best receiver in this free agency. And I do think that, like I said, I think me personally, he's definitely top 15. And I will say he's top 10, me personally, because I just think all around, he's definitely, all-around threat when it comes to wide receiver. He has good speed. You know what I'm saying? He can pretty much run any route on the route tree. He's patient with his routes. It doesn't seem like he's being rushed. Has great hands. You rarely see him drop the ball. Now, of course, there's times where he does drop the ball, or there's some times where he has costly drops, but that's what happens with any receiver. But as far as, just being an all-around quarterback-friendly receiver, I think it gets no better than Romeo Dobbs. You know what I'm saying? Because like I said, even within that limited offense, he was still able to, have 700 yards on, limited targets and limited catches. You know what I'm saying? Because like I said, within that offense, you know what I'm saying, usually within that Green Bay offense, over the past, I would say 2 to 3 years, receivers have been capped. I'm noticing a trend where receivers with that offense, but after, a receiver gets targeted 5 times, 6 times, he's most likely not going to get the ball no more. You know what I'm saying? Regardless of what receiver comes through that offense. You know what I'm saying? There was times within this season where, he'll have, quick throws. He'll have an easy 3 targets, 3 catches for 59 yards in the first half. And then there will be times in the second half where they wouldn't even look his way. Or, you know what I'm saying? Or it'll be times where, they'll go to him early, first 3 throws, go to him early, and then don't look his way out all the rest of the game. You know what I'm saying? And then, like I said before, a lot of times it will be mistiming on the routes. You know what I'm saying? Because Jordan Love was looking towards Christian Watson or Jaden Reed or, you know what I'm saying, Matthew Golden, for example, because there's so many mouths to feed. It's like it's hard to key in on one guy. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's really what they built their offense off of. You know, and I do think that at times it looks flawless. It looks like who's going to be able to stop this offense. But then there's other times where, you know what I'm saying, it's kind of like you need that number one guy, that one go-to guy. And I think a lot of times, you know, within the season, Romeo Doubs was that guy that came up in those big time, must have it, we need a first down right here, right now situations. And, you know, a lot of times, he wasn't, you know what I'm saying? But I do think he came up more times than not in those situations. And I just think when you pair him with, you know, a quarterback like Drake May, one of the best deep ball throwers in the league, I think it's a match made in heaven. You know what I'm saying? Especially for, you know, what Romeo Doubs likes to do. Because I do think at times Jordan Love, he plays it too conservative. You know what I'm saying? Now, Jordan Love, he's one of the top quarterbacks in the league for sure. But I do think, like I said, at times he does play it conservative. He's not a big risk taker when it comes to throws. You know what I'm saying? It ain't a lot of times where he gives his receivers a chance. If it's not blatantly open, more times than not, he's not going to throw it. You know what I'm saying? And that's a lot of times where it's like, if you're a big time quarterback, you should be making those throws. But for some reason, I don't know if it's, you know, Matt LaFleur's system or what. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of those times where if you're a big time quarterback and you're getting paid as much as he's getting paid, you're supposed to make those risky throws because that's what separates you from the rest, you know what I'm saying, of the pack. You know, that's what separates the Patrick Mahomes from, you know, the rest of the quarterbacks in the league. You know, because he's willing to make those throws without, you know, second guessing it, without questioning it. Like, he's willing to do that. And I just think Jordan Love hasn't reached that. But this is for a whole nother video on Jordan Love. But as far as, you know, comparing him with a quarterback like Drake May, who you can say is still somewhat conservative, I do think Drake May is willing to give, you know, his receivers a chance. You know, given that he's one of the best deep ball throwers in the league. You know what I'm saying? And one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the league. You know, and I think you compare that with you know, Romeo Doubs' deep route running or intermediate part of the field. I do think when you pair that, it's just, you can't go wrong with this situation. And also the fact that they signed him to a multi-year deal, I do think they're basically saying that he's going to be, you know, our go-to receiver for the years coming. You know what I'm saying? Because usually if this is just like an experiment, or if they just need somebody to fill in a void, you know, for a couple of seasons, or, you know, just for it right now, usually they'll sign him to a 1 year, 2 year deal. But the fact that they signed him for 4 years, $80 million, which automatically puts him up there as, you know what I'm saying, puts him up there with the highest paid receiver on the Patriots roster. I definitely think they're looking at him to be that go-to guy. You know what I'm saying? That immediate help. And the fact that they released Stefon Diggs, who was so-called their wide receiver one, and replaced him with somebody like Romeo Doubs. They're definitely looking at him towards becoming that big-time receiver, which I think is bound to happen. You know what I'm saying? He's been getting better each and every season, even though he hasn't reached that 1,000-yard mark. But he's definitely been getting, you know, better each and every season. You know what I'm saying? And I do think that, you know, with this Patriot system and basically just his whole persona, he basically fits, you know, what the Patriots like to do. You know, he's not flashy. He's very, you know, technical as a receiver. You don't really see him, you know what I'm saying, doing too much, or, you know, flashy with his routes, or one hand like he'll have a few flashy plays here and there, but it ain't, you know what I'm saying, like an Odell Beckham, for example. It's very technical, quiet, and just, yeah, like I said, I think he's a very dependable receiver. If I had to compare him to, past New England Patriots receivers, I would have to compare him to somebody like a Danny Amendola, or, a Julian Edelman. You know what I'm saying? Somebody that's very reliable. You know, somebody that you don't really hear too much about him until the big moment comes up and he makes the big plays. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, even though Julian Edelman, after he retired, of course now he's a big time, in the media, but I think as far as when you heard about him you didn't hear too much about him during his playing days. And I think same thing with Romeo Doubs. You don't really hear too much about him. He just comes up, shows up, do what he got to do, and move on. You know what I'm saying? I think he fits with what the Patriots like to do. And I do think that the Patriots are going to start leaning more towards, depending on Drake May's arm, and him having to come up with big plays, rather than last season where they depended on the run a lot. With Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson, they definitely depended on the run a lot in their defense. But you know what I'm saying? And I do think that they're going to still depend on their defense. They're going to be a defensive, heavy defense first type of team. But I do think that on the offensive side, they're going to start leaning towards Drake May making those plays. Because since they lean so hard on the run this season, teams are going to be expecting that. Teams are going to, game plan against that. Teams are, going to look to take that away because they did it so well last season, which got them all the way to the Super Bowl. Teams are going to take that away. And the only way you can counter that is by leaning on Drake May more, on his arm more. And especially given that he's also been getting better each and every season. I just think that, you know what I'm saying, this is the right situation for Romeo. That this is probably the perfect scenario for him. And yeah, it's like a match made in heaven, basically. And I see no wrong with this move. This is all I'm gonna say, is expect a big time Romeo Doubs, season. And I'm not saying he's gonna put up 1,500 yards or ink his name into the Hall of Fame in one season. No, I'm not saying all that. But one thing I will say is he's definitely going to start putting people on notice, because I think he has been flying under the radar for a while now. You know what I'm saying? He's been flying under the radar for a while now, which probably is because you don't really hear too much about him, but also because of the system he was in. I think that was kind of getting in the way of development. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, I just expect a big time season, because I've been waiting on this type of situation for him for the longest. You know what I'm saying? I thought it was gonna happen, during the trade deadline last season, where there was conversations about him, going to the Tennessee Titans and, pairing him with Cam Ward. But I think this situation might be even better, because now he's coming into a situation where there is expectations, but there's not much expectations. And he's coming into a situation where he has pressure on his back, but it ain't pressure to the point where if he plays bad, or if, it ain't a situation where he's going to be in triple teamed in every single game, and now Drake May can't get the ball to him because he's the only option. It ain't situations like that, because they still have players like Kayshon Boutte and Demario Douglas to take some of that pressure off. But just if you look at the Patriots as a whole, also, they're just a developing team. You know what I'm saying? They also been getting better each and every season, and he can come in and just, develop alongside with him. So it ain't like he's an outlier, and there's just this incredible expectation for him to just, you know, like a Justin Jefferson, for example. Where it's like you kind of expect him to play great and just, you know, come up big in big moments. It's like he can kind of come into his own. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got for this video. Expect a big time season for Romeo Doubs. And yeah, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Do those 3 things for me. Did you do them? Yeah, I'm talking to you. Did you do them? Did you do them? Oh, you did it? I appreciate it. And yeah, I'll catch you on the next one.